I love when you guys come with questions or suggestions, especially here on YouTube. And recently, Davey asked me if I had tried the Kodak Film LUTs that comes with DaVinci, both the free and the paid version, to try and use them with the drone footage. So specifically for the Mini 4 Pro. And honestly, no, I hadn't until today. I just did a quick test and I'm happy to show you guys what it looks like and how you can make them work, at least to a certain degree. And I'm also going to show you a little bit of footage from the Mavic 2 Pro that I previously had, just to kind of show you that it works on pretty much any drone, both the high-end and the minis. So let's just dive straight into DaVinci Resolve and get started. All right, so inside DaVinci, I just have a range of clips here. Now, if we quickly head to the edit page, you'll see that I have 2 tracks because I'm going to show you how it works with my own LUTs. I just released a new one yesterday, and this is how I make money from YouTube. So we'll start with what you want to see, and then you can skip the rest if you don't want to. So first of all, project settings, that's always important. I always have it at 4K. I always use 30 frames per second for my timeline. That's what I shoot in most of the time as well, or 60 for slow motion, since that works best for Instagram, and I post a lot of stuff on there as well. For my color management, DaVinci YRGB, DaVinci Wide Gamut and Intermediate, and then I output to Rec. 79 Gamma 2.4, because that's what I've set my display up to show as well here on my MacBook. You don't have to do the timeline color space here. You can simply just leave it at Rec. 79 or default, or you don't have to use the whole workflow that I'm showing you here. But essentially, let's build out the node tree first, and there's a few quirks that we need to work around with the Kodak LUT. So first up, what I'm going to do is take a color space transform here, the first one, and since the normal D-LUT conversion that's here doesn't really work the best, I choose to go with Canon lock instead, so D-Gamut and Canon lock. Then I move it into DaVinci Wide Gamut and Intermediate. Again, you can skip this step if you don't want to. And then for my input max nits here, I always crank it up now to 10,000 just to save the highlights a little bit more. Then on our last node here, we're going to go on a color space transform. And if you followed any of my other videos, this is pretty much the same. DaVinci Wide Gamut and Intermediate, into Rec. 79, and here comes the quirk. Now, if you don't want to do the whole DaVinci Wide Gamut workflow, you can just take it from D-Gamut and Canon lock here, and then do this on the last node, and then just forget all about the first node. So here comes the quirk. To use the LUTs that we're talking about, and to be more specific, we go into LUTs here. That is the Film Looks, and these are the Kodak 2383. Those were specific, the ones Davey talked about, so those are the ones that I'm going to show you here, and the Rec. 79 version. Now, you might think, okay, then I'm just going to use Rec. 79 Gamma 2.4, but there's a quirk because these expect Cineon film lock. So you need to convert your footage into that, and this is what Rec. 79 Cineon film lock, this is what the LUT expects. So if we make another node here, let's just name these quickly. DaVinci Wide Gamut to Rec. And this is log to DaVinci Wide Gamut, and here we're going to use Kodak LUT. So I'm just going to call it Kodak for now. So here we can, for example, take the D60 and apply that. You can also see if they make a big difference. They do a little bit of different things. I think I like the cooler one a little bit more. So let's go with D65 here. And now we have the LUT on. So now this is Rec. 79, and if we just remove a lot of what we have here, the clips and everything, we can see a little bit better what's going on here. So right off the bat, we can see that the vector scope, everything has been stretched out a lot. We've gotten that cool teal and orange kind of look. Everything looks at least decent to start with. So this is definitely usable, and we can continue working with this. So if we spread out our node tree a little bit more here and use a couple of different nodes here. So we are going to have something to adjust the balance, potentially, something to adjust the exposure, one to adjust the contrast. And since all the look and everything that we have is good, the only other thing I want to do is have a saturation node, saturation, if I could spell. And this one, we're going to change the color space to HSV and the channels from 1 and 2, or 1 and 3. So we only have the number 2 here. What that means is that we have hue, saturation, and I can't actually remember what this stands for, value. Anyway, what's important is we have hue, saturation, and something else on channel 1, 2, and 3. Saturation is channel 2, so all we want to be left with is channel 2 here. That's the important part of this. That means that if we take the curve here, we can kind of adjust the saturation as we want. but we're not going to do that right now. We're going to start backwards here a little bit. So first up, what I'm seeing when we apply this LUT is that it gets stretched out quite a bit. This is the Cineon log Rec. 9 footage that we were with, and this just stretches things out a lot. And I think it's okay. It looks decent enough, but I just would like it a little bit softer. So if we go into the contrast, one thing you can do is just play around with the gain and the lift. It's essentially the same thing I'm going to do with the curves here, because this would be the gain and this would be the lift, the black point and the white point. But I'm just going to pull down the white point a little bit here and also pull off the black point a little bit, because I think it's a little bit too contrasted for my taste. The reason why I don't want to go into the key here and adjust the key output or input here is because I don't want to mess with the actual conversion. Since the Rec. 9 Gamma 2.4 conversion is built into this LUT, and that's what it outputs, I don't want to mess around with that. So I want to do all my corrections before the LUT and the conversion to make sure I'm not messing with the actual transformation of the footage. So essentially we are just working in DaVinci Wide Gamut here and making our changes here. So I think we're getting to a point that looks okay now. The only other thing I'm seeing is that I think it's a little bit bright. So in the exposure here, I might just drop the offset a little bit here because I want it to be a little bit more dark and moody. And I think this looks pretty good with what we have now. I like it to be a little bit softer. If you want the contrast that came with the LUT, fine by me. You can do exactly what you want. So the only other thing here would be the balance. I'm not sure I like these kind of green tealish tones here on the greens. To me, it looks a little bit too fake. We could try and adjust that a little bit by pulling back some of the greens here and trying to play around with adjusting things. See if we can pull things in certain directions if we add a little bit of red. But I think we can make it a little bit warmer, and I actually think that helps a little bit. But overall, this is the look that you get, so I'm not going to mess around with that too much. The only other thing is, I think for me, it's a little bit too saturated. So since we changed the values here, color space to HSV, and only have channel 2, we can change the saturation a little bit with our curves here. So I'm just going to pull down on the curves a little bit, something like this, I think. And we can see on the vectorscope here, if I turn it off here, this is what we had, and on here now it's just pulled back a little bit, and we just lose a little bit of that strong saturation, which is exactly what I wanted. So overall, this is the look we have. This is what we came for. This is just the log footage, and this is what we have with the Kodak look. So I'm pretty satisfied with this. Now, I forgot one thing before, and that was to copy this to all the other nodes. So I'm just going to copy it to this one, and then I'm just going to reset my exposure, balance, contrast, and saturation. Put that here. And now we essentially just have our conversion into the Kodak LUT here. And we're just going to apply that to a bunch of other clips pretty quickly to just show you how it works versatilely across different clips. Now, I do have a lot of clips with greens in here. We do have a few here that doesn't. So those are just the clips that I'll be using today. For this next one here, I want to do kind of the same thing. So I'm just going to pull down the white point and pull up the black point a little bit, just to lose some of that harsh contrast. It's not too bad actually, but I just like it a little bit softer. And then pull down the offset a little bit here. Could also use the HDR wheels, but we're just going to go simple here. And again, I think this looks pretty good, to be honest. Again, I don't really like those deep teal greens on this particular image, just because it's a rice field and it looks a little bit fake. So I'm just going to pull up the reds a little bit here. Just play around with what I can do to kind of center it a little bit more around the middle, maybe make it a little bit warmer to get rid of some of that teal. And now I actually think we have something that looks pretty good. I might want to pull down the highlights a little bit now, just because I feel like the yellows got a little bit too strong up in the trees. But overall, I think that looks pretty good. We're going to do this. And for the saturation, I think we're in a pretty good spot here. It's not nearly as saturated as the other image was. So this was before, and this is after. Let's try and head into another one here. And I'm not sure we're going to do all of them. So I'm just going to slowly do this one. This was a really cool morning we had with some nice fog and mist and sunlight coming in here. So it's way overexposed. So I'm just going to drag this down quite a bit. And also lower the lift, bring back some of that detail in the sky. Maybe the gain only a slight bit here. And the balance, I think that looks pretty good for this one, actually. I don't mind greens here. We could adjust that, but this is more to just show you how it works. And In this one, it is actually quite a lot cooler. So what we could do was try to add back a little bit of warmth here. Maybe pull it a little bit to the green side. Just pull up the reds here, just to get back some of that warmth in the sky. And I think that looks pretty good actually. Here we have another example, and this is still from the Mini 4. So all of these are D-Log M from the Mini 4. And here our saturation has gone a little bit crazy. So I want to adjust that. Again, I'm going to soften up the image, especially this one was a little bit too strong for my taste. And then I'm going to pull down the exposure because it's pretty overexposed. I think this is a better spot, and don't want the waves here to be too dark, but I think it looks okay. I'm still going to pull down the highlights a little bit, mainly because I don't want to lose out too much detail in the water here. I think that looks pretty good. We could raise the shadows maybe to around 5, just to have a little bit more detail in the water. And then for the balance, the only thing I think I notice here is that it's very red. That's just this clip shot at sunset. So I'm just going to pull down the reds a little bit here, a little bit more. That gives us that very cool teal color as well. And I think that looks pretty good. We might want to pull back the saturation just a tiny bit here, just to make it look a bit more natural. But again, it doesn't have to. I think this looks pretty good without the saturation dropped as well. So that's a preference. And for this one, let's just do a couple more here quickly. So if we pull in here, soften the contrast just a little bit, drop the exposure quite a bit on this one. This is from the Mavic 2 Pro, by the way. And for the balance, I think we are sitting in a good spot. We could again make it a little bit warmer, maybe just to warm up those greens a little bit. I think that looks good. And I'm happy with the saturation. Contrast on this one, soften it up. I'm not even going to use the waveform right now. I'm just going to do it by eye. Drop the exposure a little bit here. And I think the balance looks okay. A little bit warmer. Something like this. Just get rid of a little bit of that very strong blue tone as well. And I might just desaturate it a little bit here as well. Just drop it a little bit in the middle. Not much, just a little bit. Yeah. And for the last one here, again, contrast. Now we ended up doing all of them anyway. Let's just stick with it here. Drop the exposure a bit, drop the highlights a little bit as well. Maybe raise the exposure a little bit again. And the balance, I think that looks pretty good. It is quite far down to the darker side, so we might just lower the saturation a little bit here, especially the shadow side here. But again, that's a preference thing. You could completely keep it as it was. We're losing out a little bit of that red color as well. I like it a bit more faded, maybe not this much, just a little bit, something like that. I think that's pretty good. Now, the only other thing that I forgot to do in this one would be to add one node here. That's the inside mask. And then we could add an outside node here as well. Then we could just do a little bit of masking. So we could do a circular mask here just to bring a bit more focus to the middle. Something like that. Shift H to see what we're doing. Bring a little bit of contrast to the middle. Raise the gamma just a little bit to bring back some brightness. So now we're just getting the contrast because we're adding back a little bit of gamma after we've lowered the shadows, increased the highlights. And then for the outside node, we can just drop the shadows a little bit here, get a little bit more of a moody look. I think that looks pretty good. So with these here, just basically added a little bit more style to it. This also looked good, so you don't necessarily have to do that. So that's pretty much it for the Kodak LUTs. They can definitely work with the drone footage. I don't like the fully teal color here, but that's a preference thing. So what I want to do now is just show you my own new LUT. So yesterday, I just added a new LUT to my color pack, and we have it up here. So we have inside the color pack, you have some conversions, creative looks, then you have the cinematic looks. And the issue with my old ones here, the Cinematic Classic and Cozy, was that you can see they dropped the exposure quite a lot. So if we reset this again, this is what we come from. Then we have Cinematic 1 and Cinematic 2. And you can see they still make soft, nice contrast, but they don't drop the exposure as much as they used to. You can see just add a bit of contrast, soft contrast, and then they change the colors, obviously, but that was what it was meant to do originally as well. So maybe we can just increase the exposure a little bit here. Something like this, and for some reason we have balanced the image here. That's not on purpose. So what it looks like now is this. I might just add a tad bit more contrast into this one, just to make that look a little bit better. And I think the balance, I actually like how this looks. It is a bit on the warmer side. I think that's okay. And we have almost the same note tree. This is my standard note tree. So if you're a bit confused about that, that is what I normally do. The workflow that we just have with the Kodak LUTs were just to showcase how you can use those. And because the LUT is at the end of the note tree, that's why it is a little bit different. And it's a more stylized baked-in look, so I wouldn't work as much with it in the same way as I do here, where I'm adjusting the curves. But you could essentially work or use the same workflow on that as well. I'm just going to do the same thing with the contrast here in the middle. So just give it a little bit more contrast without losing too much brightness. And then we can just bring down the outside here. So the only other thing here is, of course, the gamut, Canon log to DaVinci Wide Gamut and intermediate. So I've done the exact same thing with the nits here. And then for the last one, we're going from DaVinci Wide Gamut, intermediate, into X09 and Gamut 2.4. So we don't have to do any fancy tricks here because of the Cine Film log on the other one. We can just keep it as it is here. So this is what it looks like with my own LUTs, and we can just try and apply that to a couple of scenes here. We can kind of get the feel of what they look like. If we just adjust balance a little bit here. I don't know why I've changed the balance on all of them. Let's just quickly reset that so we don't have that issue. The rest. And overall, I think it's not as green tealish here as it was on the other one, but I do still think that it's a little bit much. So you could just try and tweak this around a little bit, get more of a deep green color, which is what I like for this particular clip, and then maybe drop the highlights a little bit as well. We could also do the masking, but now I just wanted to show you what the LUT does and what it looks like. So let's just quickly go through some adjustments here. So you can also see that you don't have to do a lot of mumbo jumbo to make this one work. I think this was just an exposure adjustment that we did otherwise, but otherwise this is just the clip or the LUT itself. It does some warmer tones in the highlights and some cooler tones in the shadows, but very softly, and then brings that soft contrast with it as well. And the Cinematic 1 is just a bit softer, and it doesn't bring as much warmth in the highlights as the other one does. The Cinematic, Everyday Cinematic 2 is definitely the one that I'm going to be using for most of my stuff moving forward. Then the Cinematic 2 here, this clip in particular, we need to do a little bit more work on. So I'm going to drop the exposure, raise the shadows a little bit. And then I know from the balance, we just need to remove some of the red, as we did otherwise on the other clip as well. And this is what it looks like. It's a lot more natural than the stylized look that we had on the other one. If we compare them, this is what we had before, and this is what we have in my clip. So you can see you have a lot more of that teal and orange look. You can also see the vector scope here is a lot more bended, whereas mine goes a little bit softer, actually in kind of same direction, but it's just a softer transformation. So let's just do the last few clips here. It's this one, let's add the LUT here, drop the exposure. Already this looks pretty good. And again, adding the LUT, dropping the exposure a little bit. And this is usually because I overexpose my shots and I like them a little bit darker, but you can of course play around with the contrast and exposure yourself as well. And then for the last one, dropping in the LUT here, playing around with the exposure, just seeing where things lie, just dropping it a little bit, maybe raising the shadows again. And I think this looks pretty good as well. So that was pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can use the Kodak LUTs yourself for something now. It doesn't just work this way for the drones, of course. You can use it in the exact same way on your camera footage, and I would probably go around using the same adjustments on that as well. All depends on your lighting and how you exposed your camera footage originally, of course, so that always plays a role. But I think these are great LUTs, honestly. The look is a little bit strong for me, but you can play around with that, with the contrast and the saturation, and then you can tweak it to your liking. You could also tweak it further with the curves. And if you're interested in my LUT pack, there's a link down below that saves you 25% as well. So grab the color pack if it's something for you. It really helps me out, grow this channel, and make it possible for me to continue making videos without having to get another job. And with that said, just leave any questions and comments that you might have down below, and I will catch you in the next video. Until then, take care.